Okay, now we have the window out of the airplane. The top of the window and the bottom of the window has the black line on it. The black line is just a marker for us to know where to tape to. Anywhere that we have a little bit of extra masking, a little bit close, just pull it off, bring it back. One of the things that I didn't show you before were some tapes. I used the blue, 3M blue. It's a 2090. It's part number 2090. It shows it on the inside here. This is a blue masking tape that's like crepe, just like a beige tape. It's not that painter, it is a painter's tape, but it's not that real sheer paint tape that is real smooth. That doesn't work as well as this. This has some body to it, and I like this better. I've used both of them. I can do it with both, but I prefer this. I use some 1-inch blue tape as well, 2090, and then I use 1/4-inch masking tape. Again, masking tape is not the same thing as painter's fine line tape. If you have a problem getting this, drop me an email. I can source it out for you. Most of the time you can find it at your local fiberglass supply shop, or you can find it at your local paint and body supply. Somebody that sells Imron or PPG paints will sell this 1/4-inch tape. 1/4-inch tape is really what you need, and you cannot use the fine line tape. You can't use vinyl tape. It just doesn't work as well. It creates problems that I won't go into right now. If you can't find this, drop me an email. I'll let you know how to find it. So, first thing we're going to do is remember that we're not going to disturb the black line. I'm going to take some blue tape, and I'm going to start, and what I want to do is I want to tape next to, but about 3/16 of an inch away from the black line. I can't get closer than that, and I can't get more than 1/4 of an inch, because the next tape we're going to put on here is 1/4-inch tape. And I want to make sure that when the 1/4-inch tape goes down, it overlaps the blue tape. It has to do that. So we can't get too far away, and we can't get too close. So about 3/16 is perfect. When you come around the corners, do your best. Just lift the inside edge up and put the outside edge down. It doesn't matter if this particular tape is smooth or not. And you just do this all the way around. This particular tape, you can start it, stop it, do whatever you want to it. It doesn't have to be straight, it doesn't have to be smooth. Lift the inside edge. That'll allow you to put the outside edge down without getting any kind of wrinkles on the very outer boundary. See, it's a little bit less than 3/16 there, but that's okay. It's about 1/8. We're still good. I started my pen right here, so I got a black line on the inside. I'm going to go ahead and just take that off. And the fact that I disturbed that is okay, because it's in the straight. I can bridge it. It's not a big deal. But I don't want to cover any of the black line with any of the tapings. The tapings are all very important, and I can tell you that over the thousands of windows that I put in, when I say that you don't want to cover the black up, it's because I did once, and you can see the black later. And you got a gray perimeter, and you can pull this back up, readjust it. You got a gray perimeter of seal-proof, and you got a black line showing in it. It's not very cosmetically appealing. Get rid of the dog hair. So I'm doing this carefully, albeit I'm doing pretty quick. I'm going to pull all this down and try to get this as smooth as possible. And again, I'm being very careful not to disturb the black line. I want to leave the black line on this particular thing. If you want, you can come back in and fill this up a little bit. All we're doing is just protecting the acrylic from getting seal-proof fingerprints and stuff on it. Albeit the seal-proof, if it gets on here, and if it's in a thin film, you come back the next day, you roll it off. It rolls off almost as easy as this adhesive rolls off here. It's very, very benign. So that's our first taping. This is our blue tape. Now, next thing I'm going to do is, remember, now this is all on the inside of the window. If we were doing the windshield, I would have looked through the windshield, and if you can imagine that black line not being there, but you could imagine that being the edge of the joggle, what I would do on the windshield is I'd look straight down at 90 degrees, and I would tape just like that right to the edge of the joggle. And then I would do that all the way around the windshield, so that when I turn the windshield over, I could then come in and I could tape right to the edge of the tape that I used on the outside of the window, pretending it was my black line. So I'm going to take this off here. You guys can email me. I can explain that further when you get into the windshield. That's one of two differences the windshield installation process, one of the two differences that the windshield has. So we're going to call this, the first tape we put down will ultimately be called tape number 2, because it will be the second tape that we remove in the process of installing the windows. So I'm going to start somewhere in the body of the window, and I'm just going to hold it like a tape dispenser. You can hold it like this. You can put your finger on it. I kind of hold it like this, and I just guide it with this finger. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, and I'm going to follow this black line and absolutely get as close as you can comfortably to the black line, but absolutely do not cover the black line with the tape. That's very important. Use the tape as a guide. You will tape inside of the line as accurately as you can and as smooth and straight as you can, because this will be the last tape that we pull. This will be the line that you see from the outside of the airplane. This will cut the seal-proof edge and give you your cosmetic line. If you're not happy with it, start over. Pull it off, rip the tape off, come back in, and I'm going to do my best to get as close as I can and be as straight as I can without getting to the black line. Now when you come to the corner, you have to stretch the tape a little bit. That's where this tape works and fine line does not. When you get around a corner, the fine line tends to separate. This tends to stretch. So I'm just going to hold it down with my finger, and I'm just going to work it around with this hand, and I'm going to guide it and push down and put it where I want it with my left finger, because I'm right-handed. And I'm looking for even, not looking for perfection here. This is going to be very nice when it's done, even though my gap here is wider than my gap here. You will never see it. Again, anytime you have any kind of start-stop point where you might have a little start-stop or a little bit of black on the inside, like right here, or like this one that I just put on, just take your finger and wipe it away to the outside. Because what you can do then is when you come in here, you can just bridge it. Pretend it's there, but it's not. I'm going to come to the corner, and I'm going to pay attention to this little overlap right here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just pull that out, because I don't want to tape over it at all in the least bit. And we're going to work our way all the way around the window. Now, this window is small enough, I'm going to do it in one piece of tape, but the windshield you could break up into two pieces. You start at the top, finish at the bottom, start at the bottom, and then finish your second tape of the first taping. Start it, finish it in two different locations. Start at the top, finish at the bottom, then start at the bottom and finish at the top, or vice versa. Or you can do it all in one fell swoop. So I'm doing my best to make this even, and I don't want this tape to be like bent and in crooked because this is the line that will cut the cosmetic line that we'll see. Now this tape, again, is the first tape that we put down, but as we exit here, I'm going to line this up. I'm going to line the inside and the outside edge up past this point of entry a little bit, and then I'm just going to stretch it in, rip it off. This tail I'm going to mark number 2. This tells me that's the second tape I want to pull off. Now I'm going to come back very carefully, make sure that my tape is adhered. Then I'm going to inspect the gap between the tape and the black line and make sure that I've got some clear space all the way around. If I don't, at this point, I can pull this tape off, do it again, because I was very careful not to smudge the black line. If I mess the black line up, or if I'm unsure, then you have to pull the tape, see how bad the smudge is, whether it was under the tape, retape it, or just wipe it clean, put it back in place, and rescribe it with your pen, or retrace it with your pen, and go back to this point. Now, we've got the first tape on there. I've inspected all the way around. I am confident that I have not gone over the black line anywhere. So I'm going to take my moist paper towel and I'm going to very carefully and very methodically and remove this black line, and remove it 100%. Just a slight bit of moisture from my tongue or from a little bit of water from a faucet. And you want to make sure all this is gone 100%, and right up next, if you get really close, if this tape gets really close to the black line, and you did even a better job than I did here in getting it close, sometimes the black line is difficult to get removed right next to the tape. So all of the black is now removed. I'm going to go back around one more time. Now we're ready for the second taping. The second taping, the second layer of 1/4 inch masking tape, I'm going to start in a different location for ease. I'm going to start on the opposite side as I started with this one. Now this one is not as important. All I'm trying to do with this tape is cover this outside edge. I want to protect this edge from getting seal-proof on it. And so if my tape is this wide and this is my outside edge, this layer of tape that I'm going to put on is going to cover this outside edge. Likely my air compressor will come on. So this is just a protecting tape. We're going to have seal-proof curing, and seal-proof is silicone, and we need to make sure it doesn't cure on top of anything. So I'm just going to start in, and I'm going to use the inside edge as a guide. And if you look carefully, I'm just overlapping this new tape about a 1/16 of an inch to the outboard of the first tape. And we're going to remove it here in a little bit, but all I'm doing is making sure that the outside edge of the first tape I put down is protected from getting seal-proof on it, okay? So I'm going to work my way around, and I don't care if it's wide, I don't care if it's a 1/16, 3/32. What I don't want is it really close like that. I don't want that close. I want, a solid 1/16. Now, it doesn't matter if it does this. It just doesn't matter. But if you do your best and you get it straight, it just makes it a little bit easier in the long run. This went a little bit wide back at this corner, so I'm going to pull it out and retape it. Now again, this tape starts and stops in a different spot as the first tape for ease, and I would like this in one piece, unless it's the windshield, in which case I could do it in two pieces. Start the top, finish at the bottom by blending it in, and then I'd start at the bottom with the other tape and I'd finish at the top. And that would be one layer just applied in two separate pieces. Okay, so now we're coming up to the exit point where I've got to blend it to the other tape. I'm just going to follow the taped edge. Once I get past an inch or so, I'm just going to pull it in, and I'm going to rip it off, and I'm going to call this tape number 1, because this is the first tape that we're going to pull off. Make sure it's adhered all the way around. So we're done. So now we have the taping done on the inside. We need to come back and just look at the edge. We want to sand the edge of the acrylic off. Acrylic expands and contracts, and any of these little sanding nicks from the sandpaper going over it could cause cracks later. Chance of that happening with a sill-proof installation is very minimal, because the acrylic is allowed to expand to its fullest potential and no stresses actually accumulate around the edge. But nevertheless, we're going to end up sanding this down to 100 grit. If you wanted to go to 120 or 180 or 220 or 320, or if you wanted to get really, in my opinion, carried away and take it up to 400 or 600, by all means do it. If you were doing the old-fashioned way of installing it with some sort of vinyl ester resin, I would highly suggest that, but with this, you don't need it. I'm going to start off with 80 grit. This is old 80 grit. It's been around for a while. It's probably closer to 100, but it's on a flat block. And instead of going this way where I could screw up and come off the glass, I'm going to go long ways and just, what is that, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 strokes? I've gotten all the sanding marks off except one little nick right there, which is probably from, appears to be about where I drilled. So I want to pay attention to that and try to sand it out. About 5 more strokes there did. So all I'm doing with my 80 grit, which is old 80 grit, but even fresh 80 grit would work. Even though the sanding disc was 80, it's a different scratch profile because this requires more pressure to cut. So I'm just going to go all the way around it, and I'm going to try to sand all of the vertical striations out. And this doesn't take long. Back where I started. Now I'm going to take some 100 grit. I'm going to palm it in my hand, and I'm going to sand that 80 grit out. I'm going to be very careful not to roll the paper up to the edge and scratch the top of the glass. I'm sorry, the bottom of the glass. Doesn't matter if I scratch that. We're going to sand that in a minute. But I don't want to scratch the top. So I'm going to work with the top towards me because I'm more comfortable doing that. And I'm just going to roll the paper around the edge. Well, as I'm sanding this 80 grit scratch away with this 100, I'm also going to roll the top edge. I want a radius on the top edge. When I say radius, I want, a 1/16 of an inch of radius. I want enough radius on the top edge that when we tape it, we'll be able to tape a certain way, which I'll show you in a minute. But you can determine how far you've sanded back by just looking at the edge here and looking at the sanded edge, and the sanded edge is back about this far. It's about a 1/16 of an inch. That's all I need. I just need a nice, solid, softened, rolled 1/16 of an inch edge. hard to sand too much with 100, but you can, but it's very difficult. One time I said that, and somebody did. They sanded quite a bit. They sanded almost a bevel on it. So if it appears that it's sanding too much and you want to drop down to 120 or 140 or 150 or 180, you can. You just have to sand a little bit longer. The same time I'm sanding, I'm also sanding the back side just a little bit, just so I can rub on it and not get cut by that sharp serrated edge that was left from the grinding. So I'm going to work my way all the way around. Again, I have the top of the window towards me. That's my preference. You could work away from you, but then you have to roll the edge and you're not able to see the top as easily. Where if I roll this, I can see how far on the top I'm rolling, and I can gauge my angle better. That's just my preference. I'm less likely to scratch the top surface of the acrylic. Which, by the way, at this stage, if you sand it with 100 grit, you can get it out using the micro mesh system. And I believe 3M also has a scratch removal system that works rather well. And if you can, unless it's in the middle, if it's around the edges, try to work those scratches out and polish it before you install the acrylic. That's not 100% necessary, but it's better. As this gets dull, you can flip it over. You'll notice that as the paper gets dull, it just is not cutting as much or as quickly, it's not doing the job. So it'll take you longer. So I'm get a little bit on the back side, a lot on the edge, and at the same time I'm rolling the top, trying to get a radius, a nice radius. The radius that I've got here is going to be similar to the radius that it's on the fuselage joggle. On the fuselage joggle, it also has a slight radius. So I'm back to where I started. Just fine tune it a little bit, give it a little bit more sanding on the radius. The corners tend to suffer a little bit. They tend to have less radius just because their shape, it's harder to do. So we're good. Now the entire edge has been sanded. I'm going to inspect it. I'm just going to look at it for any vertical striations. I don't see any so far. All I see is actually a little bit right there. I'll sand it with the 100. And it's gone. Again, this is about all that's necessary. I've never had a window crack using this method. Now, we have this taped off. We have this sanded and a slight radius on the top. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to take a little bit of moisture and I'm just going to de-dust it. I like to use a little bit of moisture. It tends to not scratch as easy. Anytime you're cleaning acrylic in the field, they always say to use a little bit of water. And I'm just going to kind of pat it loose. Now comes the taping with the 2-inch tape and my razor blades. Fresh razor blades are always important. When a razor blade is sharp, it cuts wonderful. When you start having problems cutting, change your razor blade. Throw it away, throw it in a cup, use it for something else. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to mask as much of this off as I can, but I'm just going to overhang the edge of the acrylic just a little bit. I don't want to roll it over the edge. I want it to be totally suspended off like that razor blade is sitting there, just flat out. You can use your finger to slightly adhere it to the edge, and then I'm going to take the razor blade at an angle. Now remember, we're working on the top of the window. I want to cut back And if you look, hopefully you can see in the video that by angling it back, I've actually cut the tape on top of the window, on top of the radius. So the radius is like this, and I hung the tape off like this, and I back cut it like this with a razor blade, so I effectively cut it right here. So I got rid of all this. What that left me was the ability to have the top masked off, but not have this radius masked off, which we'll get into later as to the reason for not having that masked off. Now this, I'm going to pick a way, and I'm going to mask in that direction. So mask counterclockwise, clockwise, whatever your preference is. I'm going to do the same thing all the way around it. The shape of the window will determine how many pieces, you know, the quarter windows and the third door window have curves to them, so you have to tape in a series of straight lines. That's okay. What you don't want to do is try to bend this masking. This is, again, a bevel cut. If your razor blade is sharp, which this one is brand new, it will cut beautiful. Okay, this is my last piece of tape. This is where I started. What I'm going to do with this is I'm going to gently peel it back, go underneath it. Remember, I went in one direction, so wherever you started, you want to do this. Pull this back over the top of it, and then we can trim it. See, now that's getting kind of funny on me, so I'm going to try to cut it, turn the razor blade over, try this edge. It's seeming to cut well. Back cutting it with an angle. Now, what we have the ability to do is grab any one of these corners and peel the tape. This tape is under there, so it will lift this tape. It's under that one, so it'll lift that one. It's under that one, so it'll lift that one. We want to do that on the outside taping, on the windshield, on all of them, because when we install the window, this will ultimately get pulled off. So this is basically it for the outside. We radiused it, sanded it, radiused it. We back cut it. It's a nice, smooth surface. If it's not smooth, pull the tape off, recut it. If you want to fill in around some of these edges and you know, put a little piece of tape here so you don't get sill proof there, you can. Again, you get a little bit of sill proof on the acrylic, let it cure, it rolls right off. It's a weird product. It holds wonderful, but it rolls off. Now we're ready to do one of two things. Some people have bonded right to the acrylic. We've done tests, and the sill proof tends to do just fine bonding to the acrylic. There was a sill proof website that I ran across one time in the past that had installation instructions on different mediums, and their recommended procedure for bonding to acrylic was a solvent wipe. That was, in my opinion, probably to get rid of any contaminants, greases, oils. At that point, I would use a rubbing alcohol, a denatured alcohol, and nothing hotter than that. So no lacquer thinner, no acetone, no MEK, nothing in the paint solvents. I'm one of those guys that tend to believe in mechanical abrasion. So what I'm going to do is tell you that if it were me, I would sand this. Albeit I have done tests with a piece of acrylic bonded to a piece of gel coat. The gel coat was not sanded, the acrylic was not sanded, and I left it sit for a week to let the sill proof cure. I went to pull it up, and it pulled the gel coat off of the fiberglass. That was a factory cutoff of one of the Glastars years ago. So I know it sticks. I'm just a little bit careful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my finger as a guide, and when I sand this, I'm going to sand straight line, and I'm going to take extra precaution not to sand the masking tape. If I sand the crepe off the tape, when we go to remove it, it will leave adhesive right in that little bit of a groove. If you leave adhesive there, it will tend to be a problem to get out without solvent. And then, so now we're ready to sand. I've got some 80 grit that we cut up, and I'm going to sand right using my finger as a guide and just rolling this in and out. I want to sand this pretty close to the tape, but you know, you don't want to sand the tape. If you sand the tape, you sand the crepe off the tape. When you go to pull it, it leaves the adhesive behind. The only way to get it off is with a solvent like mineral spirits, which is a good adhesive remover, but then it's very difficult to stop it from weeping underneath the other piece of tape. So it's better just to stay away. Just, you know, try to get close. You've got a bunch of bonded area there anyway. If you don't sand right up to the tape, it's not the end of the world. We already know that tests have shown that the Sil-Proof does stick to unsanded material. So this is, by some respects, an overkill, but it's still something I do. We're just careful around the edges, and for the extra, 1 minute that it'll take to sand 4 feet, it's not the end of the world. Now at this point, my hands are so filthy, rotten, dirty from dust, there's probably no oil, but at the same token, I'm not going to touch that unless I absolutely have to.